Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is summertime. Summertime is almost here, and that means that camp time is fast approaching. Camp time. For the Jewish community in America, the summer camp experience is almost de rigueur. Whether it's for 2 weeks, a month, or even 2 months, Jewish American elementary school aged children and teens attend summer camp. And when they age out, many stay on as counselors and staff. It's just a part of life in Jewish America. Bugs that bite, lumpy mattresses, and unruly bunkmates aside, for most kids, summer camp is a fun experience. For parents, it's a welcome respite, a time to sample empty nest syndrome well before the kids go off to college. As wonderful as all summer camps are, Jewish summer camps offer an added dimension to the life of a child. They help imbue the child, body and soul, with a sense of Yiddishkeit, of Jewishness, that can only be experienced in a place where you spend your days running free with friends you see only every summer, evenings spent in activities that entail no homework, communal dining, ruckus singing and dancing. Jewish summer camps have been around for over 100 years, and studies show that they are one of the three most important and impactful factors in the Jewish development of a child. First comes Jewish day school, no question about that. Second is the Israel experience, and third is Jewish camps. Those findings are easy to understand, certainly for the very many people who have attended Jewish summer camps. Most specifically, Jewish sleepaway camps, but even Jewish day camps are enormously important. The recipe for success is very simple. Put groups of young, impressionable people together, mostly with shared values, add exciting, dynamic, enthusiastic, and young educators. Through games and stories, song and dance, help them explore their Jewish life, and voila! You throw in the campfire, roasted marshmallows, you've created a positive, fun, doable Jewish experience. An experience that lasts, yes, it's not a cliche, a lifetime. In summer camp, you learn about Judaism in fun ways. Even the Jewish summer camps that do not have a set Jewish content and curriculum, campers actually learn. Friendships are born, and maybe even the spark of first love exists in these summer camps. What synagogues cannot do in 10 months a year happens easily during the 2 months spent in the great outdoors. Summer camps may have been perfected by Jews, but they did not begin with Jews. They began with a man named Frederick W. Gunn, G-U-N-N, in Gunnery, Connecticut. Just after the Civil War, Gunn was an abolitionist. He created a camp for boys. After the Civil War, there was a mass movement towards city and urban life and industrialization. One of the negative consequences of that urban industrial movement was that young people spent too much time indoors. Sounds familiar? In response, Gunn established a camp to get young men back outdoors, at least for the summertime. It was a good idea. So others followed suit. Then, as now, there were camps for the wealthy and camps for the urban poor. The general consensus was that the cities had bad air, poor quality water, and young people needed to go to the country for the summer. Summer camps became a burgeoning industry. There were fresh air camps, YMCA camps, Christian camps, sports camps, drama camps, camps to lose weight, and of course, Jewish camps. Before 1900, there were about 100 camps in the United States. By 1910, a decade later, there were 1,000, and the numbers just ballooned. In 1910, the American Camp Association was established. The association gave accreditation to summer camps based on certain standards. Standards included health and safety, as well as structure and regimented days and staffing. Jewish ideological camps started in the 1920s. All kinds of camps, Zionist camps, Yiddish camps, Hebrew camps, socialist camps, communist camps, even anarchist camps. In 1941, Camp Masad was established in the Pocono Mountains as a Hebrew-speaking Zionist Orthodox camp. It was so popular that within years, the original Mossad became Mossad Aleph, and then came Mossad Bet, and a few years after that, even Mossad Gimel was created. My grandfather-in-law was instrumental in starting the camp. A master wordsmith in Hebrew, he first toured the location, and decisions had to be made about whether or not to purchase the land for the camp. He punned and said in Hebrew, of course, in Hebrew, Po Kinu. Here, in the Poconos, is where we should buy. Poconos, Po Kinu. Another push for Jewish summer camps came after the Holocaust. In 1947, the conservative movement opened Camp Ramah in Wisconsin. The Reform movement quickly followed suit. In 1952, they opened their first camps. I spent over 2 decades in summer camp. I began as a camper, but most of those years were spent as an educator, and they were transformative years for me and hopefully for the thousands upon thousands of summer campers. There is little doubt that summer camps successfully mold the Jews of the future. The informal educational environments that are created and that saturate almost every activity, the religious life and Jewish values that are imbued into every camper remain part of the campers' lives forever. And to be perfectly honest, where else but in summer camp would a Jewish kid learn to shoot a bow and arrow? Like Hogwarts, summer camp has magic. Each camp has its own language. Each camp has its own secrets. In Jewish summer camps, we have an added dimension. It's called tradition. Jewish tradition. I've also been thinking about something else entirely, something that won't happen until several months from now, when summer is long over. Come November, eyes around the world will be looking toward Qatar. Yes, I said Qatar. Qatar. Because that's where, from November 21st through December 15th, a phenomenon most Americans know very little about, and most of the rest of the world worships with the reverence reserved for sports, will be hosted. It's called the World Cup, Mondial. Fans around the world will be looking at and following and cheering for their favorite teams in a sport most Americans dismiss as just another soccer tournament, a sporting event that, like the Olympics, takes place every 4 years. Although this is technically correct, it does not explain the term I've applied. It does not explain the term phenomenon. This one little detail might help. 3.57 billion people watched the last World Cup. 3.57 billion people is over half the population of the entire world. 1.1 billion watched the finals. In comparison, only 115.36 million watched America's favorite Super Bowl. The World Cup is truly a phenomenon. Israelis, like most of the world, love the World Cup. Mondial, it's called. And Israelis, like fans around the globe, look forward to not just watching it on TV, but picking up and traveling the globe to sit in the stands during the Cup tournament. But this year's event was different. This time, Israel spent months and months negotiating and finally obtaining permission for Israeli fans to sit in the stands and participate in this phenomenal event. Qatar, the country hosting the World Cup, and Israel, the Jewish state, do not have diplomatic relations. More than that, Qatar is a major supporter of Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah. And Hamas and Iran have sworn to destroy Israel. But through the mediation of the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, the FIFA as it's called, World Cup supervising agency, it was agreed that Israelis would be able to enter Qatar and watch the World Cup. Once that hurdle was overcome, new talks began, and they're ongoing to permit direct flights from Israel to Qatar during the games. It's a very short flight, actually, much like a commuter flight would be here in the United States. But we all know that actual distance is not the sticking point in these negotiations. At this point, despite the success of the first agreement, I think that direct flights may be too much to hope for at this point, as I said. But there are still 5 months before the kickoff. Stranger things have happened. Tens of thousands of Israelis are expected to travel to Qatar, even though at this point it means traveling through a third country to get there. That small detail is not hampering anyone's enthusiasm. Israelis, everyone including the politicians who were part of the negotiations, are elated that they will be able to attend just like everyone else. Yair Lapid, Israel's foreign minister, displayed his delight through a tweet. Quote, "A political achievement that fulfills the hearts of fans. After hard work alongside Defense Minister Benny Gantz and Culture and Sports Minister Hili Troper, this welcomed agreement has ripened. Israelis will be able to fly out and watch the World Cup in Qatar. The love of soccer and sports connects people and countries, and the World Cup in November opens a door to new cordial relations. I thank all those who made this happen. I can't wait for kickoff," unquote. That was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel. The Minister of Defense, Benny Gantz, put it this way: "Qatar is a country of international importance, which also contributes to maintaining stability in our region. I hope Israelis traveling there would strengthen the familiarity between the citizens of both countries," unquote. Despite the figurative diplomatic high fives now going on, there are, of course, serious worries to contend with in Qatar, because Iran has promised to attack Israelis and Israel. There's currently a travel warning from the Office of the Prime Ministers warning Israelis not to travel to Turkey, let's say, for instance, because Turkey is an easy place for Iran to organize and act. Qatar is even easier. Qatar will most certainly warn Iran not to disturb, disrupt, or defile the World Cup. And Qatar will be working very hard to make sure that the month-long sporting event is safe for everyone, not just Israelis. Any terror attack would be a terrible embarrassment to Qatar. An attack traced back to Iran, which is Qatar's ally against Israel, or an attack against the United States, Qatar's friend, and Iran's nemesis, would be enough to shatter the relationship and push Qatar away from Iran back into the fold of the Sunni Gulf states led by Saudi Arabia. Israel will do its best to coordinate with Qatar and with intelligence agencies from all around the world. The hope is that they will be able to keep everyone, not just Israelis, safe. The World Cup is like the Olympics, like the World Series, like the Super Bowl. They are all targets for terrorists, desired targets for terrorists, especially Iran, a country that sponsors terrorism. The bigger the event, the more eyes watching. That's exactly the goal of a terrorist. If an attack were to take place, their message would grab the immediate attention of the world. Despite Qatar's cautions, there is no doubt Iran, either on their own or through proxies, will try to attack Israelis at the FIFA World Cup, regardless of the risks to their status. Attacking Israel is for them a national priority. Israel and the rest of the world will do everything to stop them. No one wants to repeat the Munich Olympics. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a blog from the Times of Israel. At the Times of Israel, blogs are like opinion pieces. They are opinion pieces. They're like columns. They just call them blogs. This column is written by Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. The piece is entitled, "You Don't Need a Map to Find Anti-Semitism." It's subtitled, "Anti-Zionists may wrap themselves in the cloak of solidarity with the oppressed, but this movement is as conspiratorial and anti-Jewish as the far right." It was published on June 12, 2022. This column challenges BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. It was stimulated by a decision of the Boston chapter of BDS to publish a map of all the places and groups that passively support Israel. And then they called for a massive boycott. This is how Greenblatt begins. This week, an anti-Zionist group called BDS Boston promoted an initiative from an anonymous organization called the Mapping Project. That recently released a graphic that depicted what they claimed are an interconnected nodes of Zionism, policing, and empire around the state of Massachusetts. Among their targets, a Jewish high school, an arts collaborative, a coordinating body of synagogues, Harvard Medical School, and the combined Jewish philanthropies. The organizers explained that we have shown physical addresses, named officers and leaders, and mapped connections. These entities exist in the physical world and can be disrupted in the physical world. We hope people will use our map to help figure out how to push back effectively. We support non-cooperation, community self-defense, and resistance in all forms. Sadly, the mapping project is not a one-off from a fringe group. Rather, it exemplifies how the increasingly aggressive purveyors of anti-Zionism are spewing raw anti-Semitism into the mainstream. The movement barely attempts to use a fig leaf of opposition to Israeli policies to cover a venomous hostility to the Jewish people. Listen to how Zara Bilu, a prominent Muslim American activist and longtime leader of the San Francisco chapter of the Council of American Islamic Relations, CAIR, spoke about Palestinian solidarity. In a public speech last year, she said, "The enemy is not just right-wing extremists, but polite Zionists, including mainstream American Jewish organizations like the Jewish Federations, Hillel, and Zionist synagogues." She weaved a conspiracy of nefarious Jewish organizations that supposedly are working together to harm Muslims. And the response of CAIR, the organization, stood by her despite this naked bigotry. At Brooklyn College, Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, posted on Instagram, quote, "Zionism is not welcome on campus," and at Zionism out of CUNY, unquote, effectively calling for exclusion of Jews, students, staff, and faculty from all CUNY campuses. Now Greenblatt proceeds and offers more and more and more examples. He separates critics of Israel from those who want to destroy Israel. And that for him is a very big distinction. He concludes this column or blog by writing that words have meaning and power. These organizations know that words have consequences. Words lead to actions, so they choose them carefully. The leaders of SJP, JVP, and CAIR know this too. And so we have no choice but to take what they say seriously. And by judging those words, it is clear that these anti-Zionist groups represent a growing anti-Semitic threat in the United States, a threat that ADL will redouble its efforts to counter. BDS is becoming more and more arrogant and more powerful. There's no question about that in my mind. Next up is a column from the Media Line that was published in Ynet on June 5th, 2022. The title of this column is Controversy in Gaza Over How Much Access Resistance Helps Palestinian War Effort. Subtitle, Analysis. While the media believes coordination and communication between access parties is tightening, experts say that it overstates the capacity and the role of the allies, Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah. First, let me explain what the axis is. The axis is Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah. Many analysts believe that they are very involved in what happens in Gaza. But some analysts disagree and think that they're less involved, and this whole thing is an exaggeration. Hamas and Islamic Jihad are doing it all on their own, at least making their decisions. Here's how the unauthored column begins. The fierce fighting during May of 2021, fought between Hamas in Gaza and Israel, was led in Gaza by a joint security room that included intelligence officers from Izzuddin al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, the Lebanese Hezbollah, and Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards. The column asserts that the Axis influence is highly exaggerated. It continues this way. Ibrahim Ibrash, professor of political science at the Azhar University and the former culture minister, believes that the reports of the Axis strength and power are inflated. There is a great exaggeration made by media outlets such as Al Jazeera in estimating the access of resistance, support of Palestinian factions, and their capacities as well, he said. If it's true, the claims of strength, then why didn't the parties with the Axis resistance defend themselves when they were targeted by Israel so many times, Ibrish asked. And now, the conclusion of the essay is also very, very important to see. The real question here is, the article asks, when all red lines have been crossed, When will this axis of resistance react? Israel assassinated senior top officials in Iran, Syria, and Lebanon, yet no response has been made. Israel is occupying the entire Palestinian land, declared Jerusalem its capital. Israeli settlers are constantly storming Al-Aqsa Mosque. Illegal Israeli settlement, oppression, and demolition of Palestinian homes continue until this very moment. When will they act? What are they waiting for, he said. According to Ibrash, Palestinians, mainly the Jerusalemites, are the ones actually defending Palestine and Jerusalem, and not axis of resistance at all. Ibrahim al-Madhoun, the director of the Turkey-based Association for Palestine Communicators and Media, FIMED, believes that the level of coordination and communication among the parties in the axis resistance, especially between Hamas and Hezbollah, is increasingly growing. Muslim unity, myth or reality? More on that later. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 5 memes today. First up is a hand-lettered sign on a pizza parlor in Australia. The meme is about how important it is to follow your dreams. The sign reads, "Yesterday, I wanted beer and pizza. Today, I'm having beer and pizza. Follow your dreams." That's funny. Small dreams, but things that you can attain. Next up is another sign on an easel outside a restaurant. It is extremely cute and pokes fun at salad eaters and those of us with creative ways to justify our actions. The sign reads, "I've got salad for dinner." Actually, a fruit salad. Well, mostly grapes. Fermented grapes, wine. "I've got wine for dinner." Now that's funny. This next meme illustrates how absurd it is for emergency crews to wait before saving people's lives. We see a lifeguard holding a walkie-talkie, sitting comfortably in his lifeguard chair. The caption reads, "Lifeguard waits an hour for backup before jumping in to save a struggling swimmer." That's sad. This next meme is a similar theme. It makes fun of the tragically delayed police response in Uvalde, Texas. An officer writing a ticket asks a woman in the car, "Do you know why I'm standing here?" Looking exasperated, she answers, "There's an active shooter down in the elementary school." Also very sad, but unfortunately, we have to laugh. Finally, an oversized sign at a gas station that offers a suggestion on how to solve the problems of today. The sign reads, "Has anyone tried unplugging the United States and plugging it back in?" That's what we do all the time with our electronics, right? In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Dmitry Medvedev, the Russian deputy chairman of their Security Council, thanked Israel and Turkey for helping negotiate between Russia and Ukraine and the West. Of course, he has blamed Ukraine for all the problems resulting from the invasion. Speaking to Al Jazeera, Medvedev said, and I'm quoting here, "Mediation is valuable not because there is simply an intermediary, but because there is a platform for negotiations and parties demonstrate a desire to negotiate." And then he added that Ukraine prefers to continue fighting. Yevgen Kornichuk, Ukrainian ambassador to Israel, also praised Israel for their help in mediating the conflict. He said, "We are looking more for Israeli diplomatic effort as an intermediary. We also look to Israel as one of the most prominent possible intermediaries for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Israel has close ties with both Russia and Ukraine and is in a position where it can act as a trusted mediator." Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has had numerous phone calls with Putin and Zelensky. Bennett has even traveled to Russia to meet with Putin face-to-face in mediation. Norway has decided that all products imported from the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights will be labeled as being purchased in the West Bank. All products, all of them. The Norwegian government claims that they have very good relations with Israel and explains that they are following a 2019 European Court decision. According to that decision, Norway is referencing, people should have the knowledge of where something was produced before making purchases. Israel is extremely displeased by this new decision by Norway. Israel's foreign ministry released a statement that reads, "This is a decision that will not contribute to the promotion of Israeli-Palestinian relations. It will adversely affect the bilateral relations between Israel and Norway and impact the relevance of Norway's role in the advancement of Israeli-Palestinian relations." It is important to note that the EU court has ruled that countries cannot boycott products from Israel or from the West Bank. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro recently visited Iran. There are not too many heads of state running to visit Iran these days. Iran and Venezuela recently signed a 20-year cooperation plan. 20-year cooperation plan, that's unbelievable, according to live coverage of Iranian state TV. The signing ceremony was held in North Tehran's Saadabad Palace, in the presence of visiting Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his Iranian counterpart, Ephraim Raisi. The plan includes cooperation in fields of oil, petrochemicals, tourism, and culture. These two nations will continue to expand their ties. They will focus on their economic growth, energy, and technological fields. Both Iran and Venezuela are under serious international scrutiny and sanctions, especially from the United States. That pressure, coupled with sanctions, is one of the powerful forces uniting Iran and Venezuela. They are bound by a mutual hatred and disdain for the United States. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that in reality, Arab unity is a myth? I mentioned this earlier, and it was important. I said more on this later. This is it. It does not exist. Arab unity is a myth. There are certainly several common objectives, several Arab countries share and agree upon, but as a rule, Arab countries are not in agreement with each other. As a rule, they do not agree on almost anything. Earlier, I spoke about access support for Hamas in Gaza, that is the support of Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah, for Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. It's clear that even among these groups, there is no total support for one another. Even during a very short era of pan-Arabism, the period during which Assad of Syria and Nasser of Egypt decided to create a single Ba'ath nation of Syria and Egypt together, it was a dream, it was a myth, it didn't exist. Even those countries and organizations whose hatred of Israel is clear and palpable cannot get it together and agree on plans of actions. Kal v'chomer, all the much more so for other Arab countries. For decades, Arabs throughout the Middle East were fed the myth that Palestinian issues and Israel's very presence on Palestinian land were to be the major foreign policy issues of the Middle East. Today, the leaders of the Middle East are waking up and seeing Israel as an ally, not an enemy, and they see the Palestinians as obstacles and objectors. This is a new and more realistic Middle East. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.